for inviting us out to spend a few moments with you and to share a few comments and some direction about some of the things going on with the FAFSA. So we really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. With that said, I'm going to start our presentation. Today we're going to go into some information around the FAFSA as well as our special circumstances and some other key areas as well. And as she mentioned, Brittany, earlier, that there will be a Q&A afterwards. And we may be able to send out a survey as well. So stay tuned for that information in your mailbox as well. So I'll give you a brief overview about the FAFSA and what's going on with that. We'll go into some information around our FSA ID, as well as our dependency status and some special circumstances, questions, and concerns that you may see, as well as some new information about FAFSA.gov and our mobile app and some additional tools and resources. And I'm going to go kind of fast, a little bit fast, so we can get through this quickly and leave some time at the end for your Q&A questions. I hope that's okay. Just a little bit about our FAFSA overview. The FAFSA, if you didn't know, and I know you guys are experienced college access professionals, the FAFSA location where you will actually get the application is FAFSA.gov. That's the URL. And we really want to stress that you stress to your customers never to pay for the completion of this application. So we really are seeing a lot of fraud around the country still, and people taking credit card information and not offering this information for free. But we want to let you know, to let your constituents know, that the federal application for free application for federal student aid is just that, free. And we want you to continue to help us to spread that word. If you hadn't already discovered, and I think most of you already have discovered, October 1 was our beginning point. That's when we launched the new FAFSA for the 2019-20 year. So if you have some high school seniors right now who are planning to go to college, you want to definitely steer them to the new 1920 FAFSA application. And the application did come out this past October 1, 2018. So we really want to make sure you are letting your constituents know. Just a quick, fast overview about the FAFSA process. As you know, you'll submit the FAFSA online. You'll sign it with the FSA ID, and that FAFSA information will come to us here at Federal Student Aid. We'll receive that information, and we'll send you, the student, a SAR, which is called a Student Aid Report. And you'll list your colleges that you're interested in attending on that FAFSA application. We'll receive it, process it, send the information to those particular schools you indicated, and they will receive it and assemble what's called an award letter for you. And those will come to you in the mail. And then you'll have something to talk about with your parents and families about your options when those award letters come in the mail and you see that the various institutions have assembled a particular package for you. A critical point I'd like to mention here at this stage with folks all the time, and that is, whether you know where you're going to school or not, we recommend that you list at least 3 to 5 institutions on your FAFSA application. Whether you actually intend to go there or not, you may not know, that's okay. You may not have applied admissions at those institutions, and that's also okay. On the FAFSA, you can list up to 10 schools, and we recommend you list more than just one. And the reason for that and why that's important is that you can get multiple award letters from various schools. School A may offer you $10,000. School B may offer you $20,000. School number 3 may offer you $500, but you won't know or have anything to compare unless you've listed multiple schools. So you could actually get an award letter that only awards you, say, $500 to go to this school, and you think that that's all the money you're eligible for, and you may not be aware that you could be eligible for more dollars from different schools, whether that's public schools, private schools, 4-year school, 2-year school, proprietary school, in-state, out-of-state school, doesn't matter. When you go on the FAFSA, you can list those schools, the school code by name or the school code, and you'll get a drop-down option by state, and you can list those schools, and we can send that information to those schools so they can process your award letter. So make sure that you're communicating with your students the importance of listing more than just one school. We want to let you know that that you can let your parents know if they have more than one student or two or more students attending college, that they can go ahead and save time on their FAFSA. They complete the FAFSA with the first child. They can save the information, and when they get to the confirmation page, they can choose the option to transfer the parental information into the second child or third child. So I just want to throw a little caveat out there so you don't have to, as a parent, repeat all the information in if you have multiple children going to school. Again, not following the FAFSA. We're still seeing a lot of folks out there maybe missing deadlines. We want to let you know, to let your students know, the importance to fill out the FAFSA as soon as possible. As I mentioned, the application just came out this past October 1, but we want to let you know that different schools and states have different deadlines. They vary from across the country. So it's critical that you let your institutions or your students know to contact the institutions that they're interested in attending, that they check out their website and see what deadlines for admissions or scholarships or other institutional aid that might be available, as well as state funding. On the application, or excuse me, on the website, studentaid.gov, you'll see an option where you can select the state that you're from and find out the deadline for their particular state scholarships funds. If you don't know what those deadlines are, you can check there. But it's critical that you check out the various websites and make yourself aware so you are early and not late and get all the possible award that you are eligible for. Just a couple of hints I want to point out here, that the dependent students are eligible to receive unsubsidized loans from federal student aid without parental information. So if your parents don't want to provide the information, at least dependent students who are U.S. citizens would be eligible to apply for unsubsidized loan. That's changed from years ago when I was a director in an aid office where you could not get anything. So that is at least one step in the right direction. We know that there are a lot of parents in situations around the country where it's tough to get that parental information, but at least you can be considered for an unsubsidized loan. And I want to let you know that the FAFSA is used for more than just receiving federal aid. A lot of entities and scholarship organizations and private foundations use the FAFSA information. So it's critical that you submit the FAFSA every year so that they can use the FAFSA and fit it into their eligibility criteria to determine if you're eligible to receive some of their funds. I mentioned earlier, states give institutional aid as well, and they all have different evaluation processes. So it's critical that you complete a FAFSA every year and know that the FAFSA is used for different purposes from different entities, and they all have maybe different criteria than the federal government's as well. Parents without a Social Security number, they can use zeros on the FAFSA and then just print out the signature page at the end and mail it in. Because if they don't have a Social Security number, they will not be able to obtain what's called an FSA ID, and therefore they won't be able to submit it electronically, because that signature is your FSA ID. So they can print the actual hard copy at the end of the application and sign it and mail it in to the address on the document. Just a few roundup tips, FAFSA tips. I mentioned earlier, students can list up to 10 schools on the FAFSA. And B, when you're doing the FAFSA application, it's critical that you only focus on what the current status is at the time of the application that you're submitting. So if you're submitting it on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, the questions that you'll be asked is pertaining to what is your status the day of your submission. So we're not really concerned about what you did last week, last month, last year per se, but what is your status at the time of submission. Also, students can log back into FAFSA.gov and they can check their status, and they can come back and do updates and add schools. If they want to change the schools around from the previous or initial list that they provided, they can do that by logging back in. And if all fails, you have questions, they can give our customer service a call at 1-800-4FED-AID. We have operators standing by ready to help you with your questions. And also, we really encourage you to encourage your students to check in and stay up to date with the financial aid office. They can direct any specific questions pertaining to their aid or their packages or disbursement. They can direct those questions directly to the school. So we want you to let your students know where they can get guidance and assistance from. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the FSA ID. This is a critical piece of information that we're seeing some challenges that students are still having with it. In case you didn't know, the FSA ID is your signature for the FAFSA. It's a one-time process. You don't have to do it every year. You must be a U.S. citizen. It's for those parents and students who are submitting the FAFSA application, because you're going to sign the application with your FSA ID. So you can go to studentaid.gov/FSA ID and you can start the process to obtain your FSA ID. And again, that's a one-time process. It is a username and a password. We've really stepped up our security, and we've switched from a old PIN process, which is no longer in process, to a FSA ID, which consists of your username and password. It's a combination. So you'll log on to our websites as well as to our FAFSA application using the FSA ID, and you can get entrance or access with that ID. That is your signature. Again, I mentioned the parents and students completing the FAFSA will need their own separate FSA ID. You cannot use the same one. We ask that you use the same name that's listed on your Social Security card, so there is an exact match. So parents, if you married or renamed yourself because of marriage or something's changed, you really want to make sure you are submitting what matches your Social Security card or what the Social Security Administration has you listed as, because there is a verification process and they're going to be verifying with the Social Security Administration, and they're going to match based on the name they have. So if your name has changed, they're going to come up an error. You may have to give us a call to rectify that. Again, we ask that you submit, when you're doing your setup process for the FSA ID, that you submit an email address. If there's any changes or resets or any information we need to share with you, we're going to send it to your email address. You don't have to, it's not required, but we strongly recommend it because that's the communication mechanism we use. So if you have questions around the FSA ID, you can give us a call or send us an email and we will get that to you. Dependency status, special circumstances. I know a lot of you counselors may have situations that you deal with customers and students about special circumstances. So I'm going to share just a little bit of information with you on it so we can make sure that you have some good guidance. Dependency versus independent. Am I an independent student or a dependent student? Again, on the FAFSA application, your answers to these questions, there's an initial set of questions you'll receive on the FAFSA, and those questions and your answers will determine whether or not you will be a dependent or a independent student. We have what's called skip logic with the application. So based on how you answer, we will send you that set of questions. If you are a dependent student, you'll need to report on the FAFSA application your information as a student as well as your parents' information. If you're an independent student, you will need to report only your information as a student, and we don't need information from your parents. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that, and you can let your students know about that information, about how to determine whether or not they're independent or dependent. On the FAFSA application, I have a few screenshots here I want to show you about dependency status. You'll see how we'll ask you a set of initial questions that gets to your age, because you have to be 24 years or older to be considered independent. So as you see here on the screen, we'll ask you a set of questions like, were you born before January of 1995, or are you married, or have you obtained a certain degree, higher education degree or certificate? And so based on how you answer those questions will help us determine what your dependency status is. We'll ask you questions around whether or not you have dependents yourself, if you're providing any support for those dependents. Those are all questions that lead to whether or not you are an independent or dependent student. Again, we also have questions around the homeless youth. If you have a contact or you're counseling students who may be considered homeless, we have questions on the FAFSA around that as well. There's an issue we typically see. For example, applicants age 22 or 23 who indicate on the FAFSA that they were homeless always had to reply on the financial aid or contact the financial aid administrator to set the homeless override flag, to override those questions based on homelessness. But now, now the resolution that we now provide, that some logic on the FAFSA application, questions 56 through 58, we have modified those questions, and we will have questions to display to the applicant who indicates that they're homeless, what their status will be. So if you receive a determination, that determination can come from a counselor who may know the situation, or again, a high school counselor, or someone of that statute from the school system may know the situation. The student may be homeless. They can get a determination from that entity. Again, we'll ask some questions on the FAFSA application around whether or not you are homeless or not, or at risk of homeless, and based on what you check, will give us some indication as to what your status would be. Again, I mentioned here your high school district, they may have a homeless liaison person or someone at an emergency shelter or transitional home, or you can contact HUD and let them know, or they can give you a determination as to your status. They'll ask you some verifying questions to determine that, but that's where you could go get some information about that particular status if you come across that are students who are in that category. Just some more screenshots around that parental situation. Dependency status. These are just some samples here of some special circumstances that you might come across. Parents may be incarcerated, or maybe from an abusive situation. These are not the end all of all the kinds of situations, but just a few samples. Again, if you do not know where your parents are, or you have some situations around that, if you're under the age of 24 but you're homeless, circumstances must be documented. That's the key thing. The financial aid office is looking for documentation, not necessarily your verbal conversation, but your documentation that will let them help you. So I know a lot of the counselors oftentimes take the case information from the student, and it may be true and valid, and then they communicate that to the school financial aid office. But I'm here to let you know the financial office is definitely going to need some corroborating information, like I mentioned earlier, from a counselor or a pastor or a high school counselor or a social worker, someone who can attest to your situation, and they can be more helpful as to corroborate the situation, that will definitely in turn help the financial aid office do what they need to do internally with the FAFSA to determine your dependency status, and if necessary, consider you a independent student. If you meet one of these criteria listed here on the screen, you are considered an independent student. And that means we'll only need information from you, the student only, not a parent. If you're 24 years or older, or you're married, or you're pursuing a master's degree or a degree higher than your bachelor's degree, you have a child from which you are providing needs have support, means your own dependent, a foster care or emancipated minor or legal guardianship, or if you're homeless, I mentioned earlier, if you're homeless or self-supporting, or veteran. So if you meet one of these criteria, you are considered a independent student, and you are not going to need information on the FAFSA from a parent, just yours alone. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that information. And again, you can go to studentaid.gov for more information on that, but just want to make sure you can, that you're aware of this information so that you can share this with your students and constituents that you work with. Again, some sample cases that you may see. Parents may be deceased or may come from an abusive situation or home. You want to make sure you get that documentation and supply it to the financial aid office. We strongly recommend that you communicate this information, that you direct the students to go to the school's financial aid website. So once they've narrowed down the school that they're interested in attending, we recommend that you refer them to the school's website to find out what that school's PJ was called professional judgment, or their process will be. Each school has a different process. They don't all necessarily have the same process. So you want to make sure you go to the website and you can find out what that school's process is and follow that process for how you can get resolution to these special cases or these special circumstances, so you can help the students get the resolution that they need. So I just want to make you aware of that. I'm going to throw out a brief scenario here and get your, hopefully get your, well, I can't get your feedback, but your thinking caps on. We hear cases like this all the time. Here we go. I am a grandmother and a legal guardian of a student, and they want to fill out the FAFSA. They want to know if they can fill the FAFSA out in place of the parent. So this is a question we get quite often. We got a lot of grandparents, aunts, uncles who may have a particular student living with them because of some special circumstance, and they try to oftentimes fill the FAFSA out in place of the parent. So this is a scenario we get quite often. I'm wondering if you all receive the same. But the answer is no. The student is considered an independent student already through the court system. If they've gone through the legal process of the courts, and the court has determined that their legal guardianship, they are not in need of using the FAFSA and parent information, they can just submit their own information. Oftentimes, one may actually go to the court and adopt a student. That's also a legal proceedings. If they go through that legal proceedings, they can adopt a child. Then that child is considered a dependent student, because now, according to the courts, this child is under a legal child of the parent and is not an independent student. So, but if you've gone through the courts and got a legal guardianship status, then you're going to be considered an independent student. So I just want to throw that out there as a brain teaser in case some of you all have seen some of these kinds of scenarios in your interactions. Again, FAFSA.gov, that's the website. I want to give you a couple updates on what's new with the FAFSA. The future of FAFSA, now we have two new ways to complete the FAFSA. We've redesigned the FAFSA page. We've made we also have created now, as of October 1, a mobile option where students can go and parents can go online and complete the FAFSA and submit the FAFSA through their mobile phones or smartphones. Again, so FAFSA.gov is still available, and the mobile app at My Student Aid is available. So you want to take advantage of that. I have a few screenshots for you to see in a second. What's new also on the website, a new page there. Parents may be having difficulty finding answers to questions. On the form, we have a new section or page featuring some of these resolutions or answers that will really help them through their experience with getting to the FAFSA application. So we really are trying to do a better, more improved job with improving the parents' experience while online. A help page. I mentioned earlier our whole redesign. We call it RWA, Responsive Web Applications, which is an opportunity where we have redevised things to make things more easier to read and navigate, and change the spacing around. Just make the user aware that there's multiple ways you can now submit the FAFSA, whether it be a tablet, whether it be a cell phone, or the desktop. We've re-optimized our website to make it really a very friendly, easy experience where you can submit your FAFSA online through these different devices. So if you're starting to go to college and you have questions, you're thinking about going to college, you want to check us out online. We have a lot of good information at studentaid.gov that will help you get through the process. We encourage you to log on and just check us out. There's a FAFSA forecaster there for those who are not necessarily graduated from high school, but want to know what their aid might look like in their freshman or sophomore year. They can log on to our website and get information through our FAFSA forecaster. My Student Aid mobile app. As I mentioned earlier, students can now submit their FAFSA using the mobile app. This is just a screenshot of what it looks like, the mobile app. You can download it through the App Store or the Google Play Store and get the My Student Aid mobile app through those means. Again, you can complete the 1920 FAFSA. You can do the FSA profile there. You can manage a username and password through the mobile app, as well as information around student loans, as well as the scorecard. And you can contact us. There's a lot additional features that will be online soon. This is just a new version that's come out, but you can expect other things that will be available soon. So we really encourage you to go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and download the apps for your convenience. Students and parents they can begin, I mentioned earlier, complete and submit a new and renewal FAFSA for the 1920 processing cycle. Again, My FAFSA's ability to customize the experience based on a specific role makes it easy. So you can see on the screen, you'll see an option here where we ask you to tell us who you are. Whether you're a parent or a student or a preparer, you can select the option and you'll get those questions that pertain to your particular profile. Again, students will need to log on with their FAFSA ID. They'll be able to utilize the IRS data retrieval tool and transfer their information electronically from the IRS to the FAFSA using the mobile phone or the desktop. So again, students are eligible to transfer this information into their state application as well. Some states, not all states participate, but you'll see on the screen a list of some states like Iowa, Minnesota, Mississippi, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, and Vermont, where your information will go directly from the FAFSA into the state application. So I want to make sure that you are aware of that, all from My FAFSA. Students will be able to view additional information. I mentioned earlier about the schools. They can select those schools on their phone. Students and parents can complete and submit the FAFSA at any time on any of these devices that they prefer. I mentioned the tablet, the cell phone, as well as the desktop is available. Parents, again, you can log on as well with your FAFSA ID. And this is just a screenshot I'm showing you now with some of the screenshots that you'll see on your mobile phone, where we give you your estimated family contribution eligibility. We also define for you or give you a descriptive language to help you understand better who is the parent. Sometimes students get confused if there's a divorce situation involved or something like that. So, or separated. We give you some more plain language that really outlines and explains to you who you are or who the parent is according to the FAFSA definition. A lot more contextual help. You'll see a lot more help on the mobile app with an explanation about a variety of things, tax information, as well as, again, parental profile information and so forth. You can sign and submit the application. You'll see a messaging like you're almost done, letting you know you're in the process. And you'll see on the screen here all the 7 sections that are on the application. You can see with a green check mark that each of these sections are completed. And you'll see on the screen where we grayed out section 6 because the information may not have been needed. And you can submit the information through your mobile phone, as I mentioned earlier. Again, you can check the information before you submit and hit the green next button, and it will proceed to give you a summary of your answers there. You can print it out as well. You will see the student social security number, the last digit, so you know who we're dealing with, parent or student. And you'll be able to see the schools that you selected also on the website. And just wanted you to get a chance to see what the summary looks like. And you also see at the end of the process, that summary, the FAFSA ID, you'll see a space where you can sign with your finger in a little box. And you can also give us a signature there with a little squiggly, your trademark. But you'll actually have given us your FAFSA ID in the very beginning of the process. And so we will have already verified your signature that way. But this is just an opportunity for you to indicate with a signature, just really a semantics, but it's really not necessary. But we wanted to give you an option. Some folks like the option of actually physically signing something, so we give you that option. A confirmation page will come up. You'll see a message that says, hey, congratulations. Your FAFSA form was successfully submitted, and it'll tell you what's next, your next steps, what happens next, whether or not you'll get your information processed within 3 to 5 working days. We will also give you on the confirmation page your estimated family contribution based on the information you submitted, and also what kind of eligibility you might have in terms of a Pell Grant. So you see here on the screen a confirmation number. So if you have to call us at customer service, we have the data release number, the DRN number, as well as your confirmation number. You can refer to those numbers with the customer service rep. So we give you all those features by using the mobile app. Just want to let you all know, as counselors, we are in need of your support and help with our FAFSA campaign. that we have launched. We call it But First FAFSA. It's the promotional campaign that was launched back in September. It will take place through March of 2019. We also will be providing some assets, which will include a digital toolkit for our partners, and we do consider each of you our partner. And it's available at our FAFSA or a financial aid toolkit.ed website. This is a website that's been created specifically and solely for counselors, not students. It's financialaidtoolkit.ed.gov. So we really want you to help us spread the word to your students about how important it is to do the FAFSA first and to complete that process if they haven't already done that. That campaign will feature a lot of social media information where you can get some information from us that you can use in your own social media space and share it with your influencers. We'll be providing a lot of website and paid media information. As I mentioned earlier, some information you can download from the toolkit website as it relates to posters and screensavers and so forth and so on. So we really are asking for your support. So as you see more campaign information come out, we want you to help engage by letting your students know how they can get engaged with the FAFSA form. And I'm winding down here with just a few more additional tools and resources. This is a screenshot of our financial aid toolkit website. So if you haven't seen it, this is what it looks like. A lot of good information there where you can learn about financial aid and conduct outreach efforts, get training information, and also some other powerful resources like our webinar information and PowerPoint presentations you may want to use. We also offer that to you on our Search Our Tools and Resource page on the toolkit. So take the time, if you haven't already seen the website, to go through the Financial Aid Toolkit website and take advantage of all the announcements and information that's there for you. Again, this is a site that's designated just for you, not your parents and students. If you haven't had a chance to go to the demo site, we want to encourage you to do that. Check out the FAFSA demo site. Also, we are also in the social media space on Twitter as well as Facebook and YouTube. So take advantage of that. Feel free to give us a call at our customer service number if you have questions, 1-800-4FED-AID, and we have operators standing by to take your call just for you. And if you haven't received any information from our emails, we have a monthly email that goes out to our partners. And again, we consider you as counselors our email. Take advantage of signing up at studentaid.gov, and I will forward the information to today's host so they can send it out to you as well if you haven't had a chance to take advantage. We're going to take advantage of sending out all kinds of information related to the FAFSA and updates, training, update announcements that only you as partners will exclusively get. So you want to make sure that you're aware of how you can sign up for the partner email. You can go to studentaid.gov if you like and just put in partner email, and there's an option link there for you to sign up, and you can give us your information so we can make sure that you stay abreast or up to speed with all the information as it comes out. I mentioned earlier our 800 number, 1-800-4FED-AID if you want to give us a call, or 1-800-433-3243. And I think that winds down my presentation. I want to let you all know that there are some questions, I guess, that we will be receiving, and you can send those via the chat box, and I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability. I also want to let you all know that we are aware there's a lot of changes going on and a lot of states dealing with different situations like professional judgment differently. I know there's a population out there that have, for example, let's say a high immigrant population and may be experiencing some contact with folks who, or parents who may not have necessarily a Social Security number or may not be a U.S. citizen. I have to tell you, federal student aid is only meant for U.S. citizens. So you must be a citizen in order to obtain U.S. federal student aid funding for college. However, I want to encourage you to check out your state higher ed agencies. A lot of those states have different criteria, and they may offer funding, like, say, for example, California is a state that may offer state funding for those individuals who may fit in that category. And the institution may also offer dollars for individuals who may be in this category. But students must be U.S. citizens in order to receive federal student aid. So if they have parents who may not be in this category, they can go ahead and complete the FAFSA. Use zeros on the FAFSA application and print out a signature page and send it in, as I mentioned earlier. So with that said, I'll turn it over to our host, and hopefully she has some questions for me that you may have, and we can try to get to those.
Oh, yeah. We have a lot of questions coming in. The first
Okay.
question is, how does verification work for editing FAFSA for multiple students in the same home?
Wow. Okay. Now each student has their own, going to college has their own separate FAFSA application. They all have separate social security numbers, so they must submit their own separate FAFSA application with their parent. If they are flagged for verification, that will be handled by the financial aid administrator. And on your student aid report, which is why it's critical, you want to definitely read that. We'll process that for you from federal student aid. It will outline the reason for the verification. Sometimes related to income, maybe some challenges there in terms of things not matching up or missing information. It may have to do with a closer verification of citizenship. So you'll get that messaging on your student aid report. And if it reads that we need certain documentation, please do not delay and get that documentation to your financial aid administrator so they can evaluate it and determine eligibility, or if anything needs to be overwritten or changed, they can make those edits internally through the institution that the student is actually going to be attending. So you want to make sure you're acting in a timely fashion. Read the student aid report, see what flags you may have been flagged for and what documentation may be needed. Contact the financial aid administrator, and they can, because we're going to send information to them as well as to you, the student, and they can go ahead and process your information and do any updating or changing internally. I hope that answered your question.
And we have a clarification question. A non-citizen can still file the FAFSA and use zeros for their
Parents.
number.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Federal student aid is for students that are U.S. citizens, students going to school, whether you're a traditional age student, 18, 19, or an adult student, 25, 30, 50, 55. Federal student aid is for U.S. students only. If you have a dependent situation, for example, and the parent is not a U.S. citizen, the parent can go ahead and put zeros in the parent section of the FAFSA and print out a signature paid and sign and mail that in according to the instructions.
Is the app available in Spanish?
English at the time only.
If a student's parents have no income and only receive public assistance like TNAF, SSI, food stamps,
Right.
they should be reported as untaxed income, correct?
Right. And there are questions. I mentioned earlier the FAFSA application has what's called skip logic. So when you get to the financial section of the FAFSA, it'll ask you what your income is or what you earned for the year, that particular year, or it'll ask you if you had what your wages were. If you did not have any wages because you didn't work and you received income from other sources like Social Security or something like that, we have a drop-down list there of categories. You can select which ones pertain to you, and you can put the dollar amount that you earn from that particular agency as well. Or if you were what's called a dislocated worker, which is simply an unemployed person, let's say you lost a job, for example, just indicate that, and we can go ahead and take account for that on the application in that way. And we'll go ahead and take your submission. You can check off what type of fund you did receive for income, and we can move forward accordingly. But again, even in case, just to clarify, but even in cases like that, sometimes it's not uncommon that the school will receive your information. They'll see that, and they may ask for some verifying information as well, like say, for example, a copy of a Social Security statement for what you earned last year, or if you receive some monies from, let's say, unemployment agency, they may ask you for verification document from the Social Security Administration or the unemployment office, let's say, so they can have that on file for verification. So don't be surprised if you are asked to to support or supply that type of documentation. But it's not always, but I just want to make you aware that might be possible. It might happen.
So my next question is, do you still recommend that students create FSA ID one of the 3 days before FAFSA submission, or can they create an ID and submit the FAFSA the same day?
Good question. Good question. Very good question. We recommend that you do the FSCID as soon as possible. However, you can do it in real time. For example, if you want to submit the FAFSA today on Monday, you can get an FSCID today on Monday as well, and we will accept it. I mentioned earlier there is a 2 to 3 day processing portion that goes through the Social Security Administration to verify who you are. However, we do not prevent the student from still submitting the application, even though that process may not have been completed yet. But you can acquire an FSA ID the day of submission or the day you complete the FAFSA. But we recommend that you do that process a few days earlier to allow the FSA ID process, verification process to go through successfully. But you don't have to wait on that. I just want to let you know you can submit immediately as well. There's an option on the FAFSA.gov website that will allow you to do that.
I have a student whose parents have not worked in the last 10 years. What documents do I need to provide to financial aid offices? How do we indicate this on the FAFSA?
Well, we were only interested in income, what the status was 2 years prior. So if there was no income in that particular year, for example, we're now doing the 2019-20 FAFSA application, which means we'll be looking for income from 2 years prior, which will be 2017. So if there was no income in the year 2017, then you would just indicate that on the FAFSA would ask the question, or you can indicate you were it'll ask you the question where you're a dislocated worker. You can just check yes, that means unemployed. But again, when the financial aid officer receives that information, they may ask you to provide some other verifying information, or they may ask you some qualifying questions like how you were able to support yourself, and whatever your answer was, can you provide some documentation to show that? So they may ask you some questions around what other income you did receive to support yourself for food, housing, or other things. So don't be shocked if they ask you that. But on the FAFSA application, you would just check the box that you were a dislocated worker or unemployed, or put 0 where there was no income.
I have a student who made less than $8,000 but claimed exempt. Would this affect her EFC?
It could impact her EFC, but again, we'll evaluate that when it goes to the process, and it should not. They should be eligible for some federal assistance, but it's just going to have to go through the process of submitting the FAFSA, and then the school will have to check that if there's any questions or anything that needs clarifying. But that EFC will be given to you at the end of the FAFSA submission process, so you'll know at that point if you're impacted at all.
Okay, we have a good question about homeless status. So I have a student that's family has been through a hard time.
Okay.
The person they live with does not want them using their address. They have a couple of questions. Is the student considered homeless? The mom is not filling out any taxes and hasn't worked, so there's no income info. So they're asking, what should the student do, and can he be listed as a homeless student and be classified as an independent student?
Well, they'll have, as far as the FAFSA application is concerned, if you feel you meet the criteria as homeless, you have no place to live or whatever, you can check that box on the FAFSA application and hit submit. but you most likely will be flagged for verification and will have to provide, as I mentioned earlier, some supporting documentation, like from a high school counselor or someone who can corroborate your status, or a social worker, or someone who knows the situation that you're in. And so you'll need that information that you'll have to provide to the actual financial aid office. But for FAFSA application purposes, you can go ahead and check that you are at homeless situation, and check that box and hit submit. So you won't be stopped from doing that. But you will need to get that information corroborated or verified. I mentioned earlier, from some high schools have a liaison department or person who handles that, or there's an agency or a shelter or someone who can corroborate that. But if you're saying you're homeless and you're living with a parent, but if you're declared homeless, you're going to be independent automatically. So the parent's information won't even come into play. But if you are considered a dependent student, then the parent's information will come into play. But you want to make sure that you are able to provide the appropriate documentation to corroborate and substantiate that homeless status. And you'll provide that to the actual institution that you want to attend. But for FAFSA applications, you want to check that box and then hit submit so we can get the FAFSA process underway.
I have another question from a counselor who says that their student was trying to submit their FAFSA, but the DRT did not show up. Is there any reason
Oh, yeah.
why?
Oh yeah, the IRS DRT. Yeah, through security measures, you will not see your answers appearing if you use the electronic IRS DRT, which is basically a button that is available online on the mobile app as well as the desktop or tablet that allows you to hit the button, and the financial information that the FAFSA is asking for will be automatically imported into your FAFSA application if you have submitted your IRS tax return. And if you've done that electronically, then that's going to be available to you. So if you, but if you want to see the information, then you can choose not to use the IRS DRT tool and input your financial information manually, and then you'll be able to see what your answers are. But that's the only way you're going to be able to see your answers, because there's an agreement with the IRS that we have, and we really have stepped up all security measures even more, and we want to avoid any fraud or people trying to hack the system and see income information. So that information is no longer visible through the IRS DRT tool. However, I encourage you to use the tool because it's going to be information that's going to be verified already through the IRS, and it's going to be more true, and you're most likely not going to be selected for verification because we've got the information straight from the IRS through the IRS DRT tool.
Why do students get selected for verification more than once if they can prove they were being honest on their FAFSA once?
I don't know. There's no direct answer for that. It's just a random process. That if you've been flagged for verification, those are typically flags that highlight some possible unusual situation. Doesn't necessarily mean anything fraudulent has happened or anything wrong has happened, but it's just a way to verify that the information is true each year, because one has to submit the information each year. So if you're in a certain situation and you've been flagged for verification, then the federal government is going to ask the school to verify some key elements. So make sure you read your student aid report. There is no real reason, a definite reason why one may get flagged each year for multiple things or multiple times. But just if you've been flagged before and it's for the same thing, like for example, homelessness, your status may have been homeless in one particular year, let's say your freshman year, but say your sophomore year, you may not be homeless. We don't know that until you tell us. Or it could be that you are still homeless your sophomore year or junior year. So each year is looked at independently and separately. So you may get flagged and have to verify that annually if that's your situation.
Okay, I have a couple of questions regarding the definition of legal guardian. So the first question is, what if a student is living with their grandparents, but they do not have legal guardianships, and the parents live in another country? What documents would be required for them to submit? And we also had another follow-up with an organization that is working with students who are just living with individuals
Mm-hmm.
that don't have the legal
Mm-hmm.
guardianization identity.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot you gave me, a mouthful. I understand that situation, but I have to be clear. U.S. federal aid is only for those U.S. students who are U.S. citizens. As far as their parents are concerned, they will, if you are, and if I heard correctly, you said you may have a student who's living with a grandparent who may not be a citizen, and that's okay. And we want to thank the grandparent for providing that support. But for FAFSA purposes only, the FAFSA is only looking for information from a parent, not a grandparent, not an uncle, not an aunt, not a cousin, or anything like that. So even if you are living with an aunt, uncle, cousin, grandparent, you cannot put that person's information on the FAFSA application. And I'm only talking about for FAFSA purposes only. So if you cannot obtain your parents' information for whatever reason, you can, as I mentioned earlier, submit a PJ case or a special circumstance case to the financial aid office directly by writing down your situation and getting some corroborating support documentation and letting the school evaluate that and determine eligibility. We get a lot of questions around the country where parents are available and just don't want to give their student their information, either because they figure they're 18 and they don't want to be connected or whatever the reason is. But if that's the case, as unfortunate as it is, it's going to mean that the student's not going to be able to submit parental information, and they're only going to be eligible for, let's say, a unsubsidized loan that I mentioned earlier. And they're going to have to follow up more so with the institution, maybe see what kind of institutional aid is available, or some other state aid or program or foundation or community organization that can help them that way. But we're going to look for parental information and student information on the FAFSA application. And again, if you are not a U.S. citizen as a parent and you're trying to help your student, you can put zeros on there for social security number and print the signature page out and sign it and mail it in. Otherwise, you may have to follow up with the school in regard to their special circumstances process and use that process to determine eligibility, or it may mean that the student may be only eligible for unsubsidized loan because they can't get parental information on the FAFSA application for us to process.
Thank you so much, Fred. I have one, like a follow-up question or clarification. They wanted to know step parents. Does there need to be any records that the step parent legally adopted the student, and does that cover legalization with the parents?
If I understand your question correct, if the parent has gone through a legal adoption process with the courts, and they're wanting to submit the FAFSA for that student, then that student would be considered a dependent student. Because through the adoption process made that parent the legal parent. And so if they get flagged for verification, only if they get flagged for verification, they may need to provide proof that they have adopted the student and they are now the legal parent for the student through the adoption process. So that's only if they get flagged for the process of called verification. So they can review their student aid report when it comes from federal student aid, and they can determine that. Or the school that you listed on the FAFSA will reach out to you and let you know what documents they may need, if any at all. So it's not always necessary, but it may be necessary to submit that information, and the school will let you know, and we'll also let you know on the student aid report.
Okay, and I think we're at time.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you a breath and a round of applause
Oh,
um,
it's okay. No, I'm glad to be here.
our drilling session. And to my counselors, if we did not answer your questions, I'm going to work with Fred to follow up. So thank you so much, Fred. I'm going to go ahead and transition to our conclusion. And give me
Okay, the pleasure's all mine.
Okay, perfect. Um, so if counselors, thank you so much for joining today's conversation. I hope you found this conversation very insightful. I again want to apologize if we did not get to your question. We had a lot of questions coming through, but we're going to try our best to send some follow-up. Everyone should receive a recording in the slides so you can review at your convenience. After the live presentation, you can expect that within the next hour or so. If you all are interested in participating in more of our webinars, we have an upcoming webinar presented by Smith College on the Women's Advantage, the Women's College Advantage, where we're going to be inviting the Dean of Admissions at Smith College and 3 current college students to talk about their experience and the edge of being a part of a women's college. And they're going to provide you with some best practices on how to really sell or get your students to be more interested in participating in a college, a women's college. So that webinar will be October 31st, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And I have provided you all with the registration links. You can go to cgl.fyi/Smith2019 to register. And if you aren't able to make the live presentation, we will follow up with a recording and the slides to review. Just make sure you register. In addition to that, at the end of the day, we're completing our FAFSA, but Greenlight is a really great resource for our students to explore private scholarships. So please, if you haven't gotten your students to set up their accounts, this is the prime time. We have many scholarships that we are personally matching to students and also keeping them informed of all new applications that are becoming available that would be a good fit for them. So please, if you have any questions or you would like a College Greenlight team training, please type "I'm interested" in the chat box or email us at info@collegegreenlight.com. All right, so we're going to end our conversation here. I wanted to thank you, Fred, so much for such a wonderful presentation and making yourself available to us to answer all of our questions. Thank you. Okay, we're signing off, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and good luck in this FAFSA application season. All right, take care. Thank you, Fred.